Hello and welcome to the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I'm your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is an internationally recognized scientist in his field. He graduated with a Ph.D. in Sensory Neuroscience from the Ohio State University and served as professor of neuroscience at the State University of New York for over 30 years. He has published over 60 articles in scholarly journals, lectured at national and international scientific conferences, and was awarded several major research grants from the National Institute of Health and the National Science Foundation. Since his retirement, he has co-authored articles in the Journal of Consciousness Studies and the Journal of Scientific Exploration. He has written 3 books entitled Unseen Forces, The Integration of Science, Reality, and You, The UFO Phenomenon, Should I Believe, and Life After Death, an analysis of the evidence. Welcome to the show, Dr. Bob Davis.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, Matthew. And please call me Bob.
You got it. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to have you on the show. You reached out and you said, I think we might have a fascinating conversation. And I looked at your work and I was like, yes, we will. Please come on. Tell me about yourself. Tell me about your work. Such in-depth work you've done. You've been in the field for a very, very long time. So why don't we just start a little bit about your background, how you got into neuroscience. You know, I love reading your bio when it said, in his retirement, he's written 3 books, 60 articles. So your retirement's going well, I see.
It is going well, and I'll try to go over my own bio in a relatively quick manner. I for some reason I don't like talking about myself. I'm not sure entirely why, but that's the case. Always had an analytical mind. You know, 1 and 1 equals 2, and nothing else. That drew me into science. I found the central nervous system's sensory systems fascinating, and thus obtained some advanced degrees in that area. Proceeded to teach, conduct research in the sciences, and followed the scientific method for decades. But all along, I've always had an interest in the unidentified flying object phenomenon. Let's call it UAP, unidentified aerial phenomenon, preferred term. For some reason, I'm not sure why. We all have that innate sense of spirituality, curiosity. We all ask those big questions. You know, are they coming here from there? Is there life after death? What is reality? What is life? And we'll touch upon that a little bit because my recent book, Unseen Forces, The Integration of Science, Reality, and You, attempts to do that, looking at the peak experience. But let's address more of this evolution of my life, which drew me here today, Matthew. With that inherent curiosity about the unknown, and in particular the UAP. When I went to Sedona with my wife back in 2012, it was night, and all of a sudden, 2 orange orbs appeared in the night sky. They remained stationary for a few minutes, and then suddenly winked out. Well, that got more than my attention. Well, is that an intelligence from somewhere else? Who knows? Point is, it knocked my socks off because it was unexpected, and I could not attribute anything that I was aware of to associate with that image in the night sky that I saw. Call it a UAP. All right? That spurred my deep motivation to write the book, The UFO Phenomenon, Should I Believe? About 2 years after that, I had a lucid dream, a dream that feels realer than real. And in that lucid dream, I was suffocating. I couldn't breathe. The terror that I sensed during that moment was horrendous. It truly felt like I was suffocating. It woke me up, not surprisingly, and I knew, and knowing this, I knew at that moment my dear friend Anne passed away. You guessed it, she did pass away at that time. All right, that motivated me to write the book, Life After Death, an analysis of the evidence. It didn't end there. I then had a so-called Kundalini experience. For those maybe not familiar with the term Kundalini, we're talking about a spiritual, mystical, extraordinary experience. Let's call it the peak experience. And everybody has it or manifests symptoms of it a little differently. Long story short, I felt this sudden, powerful, energetic force. It was highly positive, joyful. I didn't want it to end. And that persisted for quite some time, but it had an after effect. Once it subsided, it left me with an altered state of consciousness or reality. What does that mean? Well, I was looking at the world a little differently. In a positive way, I felt interconnected with nature and the universe, closer to people. I felt joy and appreciation for life. I didn't communicate with the deceased as many do when they have peak experiences. I didn't have alterations of time and space as many do who have these kinds of episodes. But I had the impression of the awareness of an ultimate truth and the unity of all things. A cosmic kind of energy embraced me. I wanted to hug trees, and I did. I felt that, I felt that close to nature. It's almost as if, I said, it's a living thing. Let me show it my appreciation. And it felt good. It did. It felt good. That integrated in my life and associated with all those positive symptoms, however, was severe anxiety for a period of time, which is understandable. What happened to me? I was a little different yesterday than today. Is this psychosis? Should I see a psychiatrist for this? Well, I didn't. And it did subside after many weeks. But during that time, I read about the Kundalini, mystical, spiritual experiences, and I related with a lot of it. But that experience led me on that evolving path, as you can see. That third experience, the UAP, the shared death experience, and now this mystical experience, led me to write this current book, which I just mentioned, Unseen Forces, because I wanted to gain more information about what is going on with reality, with life, with our perceptions. Am I the brain? Are people seeing a different world, or are they seeing this world differently when they have these kinds of peak experiences? I try to educate myself through my writing. And if we look at the peak experience again, we're talking about a spiritual, mystical, extraordinary experience that's been reported throughout history, across cultures, and is characterized by various states of, let's call it, altered states of consciousness, or my interpretation of reality is a little different than before. But it's real life. Nevertheless, but it includes certain types of triggers for this peak experience, the near-death experience, the out-of-body experience, even experiences generated from psychoactive drugs like dimethyltryptamine, DMT, psilocybin, LSD can give rise to a peak experience, and even interactions with unidentified aerial phenomena and associated non-human entities with that phenomenon. All these individual types of experience reported by millions worldwide. Millions experience one or more of these on an annual basis in the United States alone. And we don't have good incidence statistics, but we know it's up there in the millions. Well, I guess you can make the case that the peak experience is like the Walmart of the paranormal, and we don't understand it. And that's the problem. Psychologists in particular should be more sensitive to individuals who have these kinds of experiences, who are yearning for answers, but they believe with fierce determination that they pierced the veil. They sensed and experienced an alternate reality, and they interacted with deceased relatives. with supreme beings and deities. They report gaining significant insight and wisdom. They report the absence of time and space. I'm talking about all of these. They share common characteristics, differences too, no doubt, but there's enough commonalities among these types of peak experience triggers to suggest something quite profound, and we will get into that. But when they're in this kind of experience, whatever it may be, they have telepathic communication with beings that they see, and they report an increase in intuition or psychic abilities, and they feel that they are again interconnected with the universe. They're one and the same. And what is especially unique is that these individuals, by and large, are changed in a psychospiritual way, in a positive way. They become more humane. What does that mean? More humane, more compassionate, empathetic, sympathetic, more sensitive to the ecological condition of the earth. They become more spiritual, less interested in organized religion, less interested in materialism, owning things to achieve happiness. Their priorities in life are shifted. Not so much money, but money's important, yeah, but it's not at the very top of the list as it may have been previously. More concerned about people in general and can read people better. But they seem to possess this awareness of ultimate truth and the unity of all things. And again, are these individuals seeing a different world, or are they seeing this world differently? And that's the basis, the essence of my book, Unseen Forces.
Holy smokes, man. So you got the trifecta. I never really thought of it like that. The three things. You had the very powerful lucid dream connecting to a near-death experience, the quote-unquote Kundalini experience, which people, I think, strive for, and the UFO. It's like you hit them all, and you did it from the perspective of a neuroscientist. And I think that I can only speak for myself, but I also know personality types, and I know that my personality type is very kinesthetic, and I'm very big picture thinking. So when it comes down to detail-oriented tasks, I struggle with that. So hard science and things like that is something that I'd have to work towards. So it's amazing when somebody who is super detail-oriented, scientific, using the scientific method, experiences something that is not normal. It's a phenomenon. And rather than, I think for me, like when I was growing up a martial artist, I was so curious in those experiences because I knew it was possible. I was able to go into a meditative state and experience a different form of consciousness. And then it would make me question the material reality. And I was like, I know there's something, I can't explain it, where science didn't go far enough. But now as I'm getting older, I'm really fascinated by what the science is telling us. So I think it's incredibly powerful, your experiences. And I'm just want you to keep talking and sharing what you found out, what your perceptions are, what did you research and find that was most important to share, and can we recreate these? I think a lot of people, there's a good side where they want to improve and increase and expand their consciousness and experience this oneness, and sometimes they become ungrounded. And then on the other side, you've got this strict, rigid, scientific way. There's nothing else. It's only what I can prove. This is the way it's always been done. These are my beliefs, and I'm not changing. You've kind of got those two ends of the pendulum. So maybe you can address some of that.
Well, meditation, as you experienced, can also facilitate that dual awareness, a dual consciousness, achieve a cosmic consciousness, which I guess is the ultimate objective of meditators, where they have this Kundalini or peak experience, and you sense something different. Your reality, in some way, was modified. It may have been temporary, or long lasting. I don't know, but it generates questions, which I do address in my book. Which the obvious ones are: what is consciousness? You experience it. I experience it. I'm sure many of your listeners have experienced. I'm not talking about marijuana or booze. I'm talking about other types of trigger events that are not drug related, that manifest in these kinds of symptoms that have no basis in logic or reality. Science cannot explain it. Science will look at it as an aberration of the brain, but it's not. It's not. Because if people are psychotic, they experience anxiety and depression, their quality of life, obviously, is poor. They suffer, as well as others in their environment as a result, in general. However, the peak experiencer, who manifests these largely different kinds of experiences that science or medicine, psychiatry may perceive as abnormal in nature, and we're talking about an altered state of consciousness, labels then are given. Language, unfortunately, is a barrier. It impedes our understanding of what's going on. So they throw these terms are like psychotic, dissociative disorder, a dissolution of some type. But these peak experiences don't behave like a psychotic individual. They just the opposite. As I mentioned prior, they become more humane. They experience joy, pleasure, happiness. Yeah, they have unique anxiety, no question about it. But their psychospiritual perspectives, their personal viewpoints, philosophical values are changed for the better. That's not psychosis. That's not abnormal thinking. Not at all. It's just the opposite. Yet science will still consider it a pathology at some level. Transient in nature, maybe, but nevertheless, they can't accept the fact that these individuals are now saying, I experience another reality, and people in varying ways, and it's as real as my morning coffee with a bagel. Well, what do you do with that? What does that mean? It obviously generates many questions. What is consciousness? And there's an endless stream of papers written on consciousness by scholars far more intelligent than I for centuries. And today they're still debating consciousness. We don't have the criteria to understand what that is. So what are we talking about? We are conscious. And we're trying to explain consciousness. Talk about the ultimate paradox. How can we ever get an answer? Consciousness explaining consciousness. Well, we have best guesses, gut feelings, hunches. Is consciousness, however, independent from your brain? And does it persist after death? And are you just a jelly-like mass of fat and protein consisting of 100 billion neurons with more interconnecting synapses in your brain between your ears? Is that you? Should I, when I say goodnight to you, should I say, good night, my son, or should I say, good night, my brain? What are you? We have to raise these questions because experiences like this force us to, especially if we experience it, let alone trying to deal with the aftermath of these transformative outcomes that are causing us to question reality, but also, again, generating a more positive behavioral outcome. The question is why? Why does the peak experience cause these transformations in personal philosophical viewpoints? Can it be explained by new principles in quantum physics, as many do? And I address some of that. I keep science down to a minimum in my book. Can the brain explain it? Brain glitches, miscommunication between the prefrontal lobes and other parts of the brain that modify sensory input. If there is some kind of miscommunication, well, the individual may indeed have an inability to distinguish external from internal reality. That orientation problem may result in one's inability to sense space and time. It creates a type of unitive experience, which falls under the heading of a spiritual mystical experience. And so you can make a case, but not a strong one, for the brain to facilitate these kinds of effects. But where in the brain is my interaction with deceased beings, deceased relatives, and a supreme being? Where in the brain is the fact that these people report to have telepathic communication with these individuals? Where in the brain is it that this experience alone, which may last for a few minutes or a few hours, changed me in dramatic ways, largely for the positive? In general, some people have negative experiences, but that's in the minority. Where in the brain is that? Are there, in other words, invisible connections between humans and others? And can humans indeed influence physical systems and other brains? ESP, extrasensory perception. You know, if we assume, let's say, that one is able to access another dimension, another reality, whatever we may want to call it, interact with beings and the deceased, then it should be some kind of form of you, spirit, soul, consciousness, you know, all of these terms probably apply. They mean the same thing, used interchangeably, too loosely. But you, whatever that is, whatever we want to call it, it's not bound by time and space. In some inexplicable way, it's capable of doing this. And they believe it to be true. And the question then is, how is consciousness, or you, facilitated by the brain? That lies at the heart of this issue. What is consciousness? And maybe by studying the peak experience, the essence of the semantic content of what these individuals actually experience, compare them among peak experiences, compare them against psychotic-like experiences, compare them against the experience that a person with the skull removed and a neurosurgeon stimulating various parts of the brain, resulting in a sensory memory recall of varying kinds. Compare it to that too, to better understand the unique features of the peak experience, to differentiate it from brain alone events, psychotic-like abnormalities, to better understand what's going on. And what's really interesting is that current research is showing that look at the power of the psychedelic drug like DMT. There was a recent study done out of Johns Hopkins University. It was an online survey of over 3,000 individuals who experienced psilocybin, DMT, or LSD. Over 30 questions were asked of them. And of those who participated, approximately 1/4 of them were atheists before they took the psychoactive drug. After taking that drug, 2/3 of those atheists now believed in a supreme being, a higher power. Now, if you know, that's quite dramatic. A peak experience generated by a drug is actually altering one's not necessarily religious perspective, but they're a major viewpoint about life. To go from an atheist to now believing in a supreme being, the question is why? Can this drug, taken orally, actually create that major alteration in philosophical viewpoints at that level? Wow. Well, not alone. And near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences do that too. Meditation can also result in that. A type of experience that is so dramatic that the person is changed from that moment forward. Not always positive, but the vast majority do have a positive, long-lasting experience that is transformative in nature. You know, Western science looks at this as Reality is sensory stimulation. The Big Bang occurred 14 billion years ago, and photons of life emanating from that Big Bang are just now bouncing off physical structures, entering my visual system, which converts it, that form of energy, into a form of energy the brain can understand, neuroelectric, of course. Is that reality? Photons emanating from the Big Bang 14 billion years ago? Is that reality? Maybe it is. Maybe it is. I don't buy it. My gut feeling says, no, not at all. So Western science says reality is sensory experience. What you see is what you get. You are the brain. Brain is dead, you are dead. EEG flat, goodbye. Eastern perspective is just the reverse. Consciousness, in other words, is the ultimate reality. Whereas in Western science, materialism is, realism is the scientific method. That's why these experiences don't sit well with science, those who ascribe to this scientific method, Newtonian physics. It disobeys those laws. So I don't want anything to do with it. I'm not going to study it. It's woo-woo. And that's too bad. That's a bias. It impedes progress. It impedes our ability to better understand aspects of reality that people are experiencing that may very well, I'm not saying it is, may very well represent ultimate reality and truth. Or not. But we're looking at millions of individuals who are experiencing this and are changed. It means something. Let's not ignore it. Let's help them manage their anxiety, maybe depression initially, but let's try to gain also additional information that can better inform us of what we consider as perceptions as the highest form of reality. What is reality? These millions of people are saying, I interacted with another reality that had these characteristics with these beings on it, and I'm changed. Shouldn't that be reality? What is it? They experience it. They're changed from it. What do you want? What do you want, science? Photons bouncing off of physical structures, emanating in a neuroelectric event, and I go, aha, that's a blue wall. That's a cathedral rock from Sedona. And nothing more? That's the ultimate issue at hand here. So, what is this all about? The near-death, out-of-body, unidentified area phenomena, meditation, psychoactive drugs. What's unique about all of these things that seems to give rise to similar outcomes, a similar experience and similar outcomes? Obviously, unique differences among them, but there's a commonality. Is that common unifying issue consciousness? You, who believes, based on these experiences, pierce the veil, touch that reality, and they believe it. They believe that they are no longer a physical body. They believe that their consciousness, them, you, I being aware of being aware, is independent of the brain. If you believe that now, at a level of certainty that these individuals do, we can only imagine. If we believed it with that level of fierce determination, it would change us too. We speculate about it. We say, yeah, I believe I'm not my brain, life after death. I believe. That's not the level of belief that these individuals have. They believe it like the back of their hand. It's a difference. And you have to believe it like the back of your hand in order to be transformed by it. That kind of cause-effect relationship. I've talked to people who've had near-death and out-of-body experiences, interacted with UAPs. Remarkable similarities, and it's remarkable also. We come in it with different personalities. We're all different, so these experiences are going to have nuances, differences among the individuals. Everybody's different, but it interacts with the experience. I know somebody who interacted with a UAP and beings, and because of that, they feel that the information they receive from that interaction about life, about reality, they believe that they were chosen. I'm chosen. I was selected. I am unique. I know the answers to life. They have this, I'm not sure the term, but a grandiosity, a narcissistic kind of reaction. I don't know if I'm now God kind of attitude, and becomes belligerent, antagonistic towards anybody that will question them, question that the experience that they have and their perspectives, newfound perspectives on life. It agitates them in a pathological way. So here we see a negative outcome of a peak experience. It can happen, but by and large, the positives, at least in those that I've interacted with, largely outweigh the negatives. And it's a pleasure interacting with them. They just feel at ease, balanced, lucid, real. And their priorities are appreciated, respected by me. And I sense there is something uniquely different about them. They had an out-of-body experience, and they say, I move by will. I interact with this other universe. And it's wonderful. Now, look, if it's a delusion, if it's a brain abnormality, and it could be, I'm not saying it's not. I don't think it is, but I'm not absolutely certain. If it is an aberration of some type, and it doesn't represent an alternate reality and all that, give it to me. Give it to me. Come on, give me more of it. Can we bottle it up and dispense it in the water supply so that everybody on our planet can drink it and potentially benefit from it? What is this thing? What is this thing that's rocking people's world largely for the better? That's a little risky. Yeah, it's a little risky in some ways because it can have negative outcomes, indeed. But I don't see it as a psychotic event because of the positive outcomes that it generates.
Oh man, you touched on so many different things there that are important. And I wanted to kind of distinguish between a few ideas, because some of these events, you say maybe like you see a UFO, or your term, I forget, I wrote it down so I'd remember, unidentified phenomena, which I've experienced and several times. And I know people who have told me several experiences and things like that, where you see something that's just even my partner actually saw, and she's not into any of this stuff, and just saw, apparently it was a sun behind the houses, and just in a small town, and like we're in Cambridge, Ontario, and she just stopped and was like, what is that? And she said, and I got her to tell me the story over and over again, and then it looked like the sun and this orb, and then all of a sudden, poof, just disappeared. And she's like, what? And this was like just at sunset. And so she had never seen anything like that. So an experience like that, or a Kundalini experience, this is something that you, like Kundalini is you experience it viscerally, something you might experience outside you. Like if you see Bigfoot or something, and you're like, oh my goodness, you're breaking the paradigm of your mind. And as a neuroscientist, you know much more about this than I do, but there's the understanding that you understand reality through whatever you believe, and then you just keep adding on to that. You keep supporting the beliefs rather than look where there could be holes or where there could be something more. We don't naturally want to do that. So what it does is it makes you rethink everything from the core, and it's a very valuable experience. Then you've got like the DMT or a psychedelic experience that can induce that. So you're making the choice and you're kind of asking for help to induce a different state of mind. And there's a lot of research out there that is showing, positive side effects of, LSD and psilocybin and DMT, all varying risks. Also ayahuasca as well. A lot of great reviews coming from there. But if you do research too, there are some cases where it's not so good. So you really need to be you really need to just do your own research, see how you feel, and see if that's something that you'd want to take in. And then the last point that I just want to share for a distinction is the self-induced natural way. Can you do it through meditation? What are Kundalini teachers doing? How can this be induced? And so I'm just imagining a listener there, and I've had a few people come up to me and they'll talk about the podcast, because a lot of people have experienced this. Sometimes life will just give it to you. That's, I think, that unforeseen force. I call it the universe, the great creator, whatever it is. It's like this thing might go boop, and all of a sudden you're in it. And some people really yearn for that, and they feel like if they're doing a meditation practice or something, that they need to have that experience. And some people will just like eat vegan, go fasting, do everything they can, and then they don't have it, and they're like, oh, why am I not having this magical experience? So I just wanted to share all that, to hear your views on what you think. If you've discovered any ways that you can induce this experience through Kundalini, anything you find important there. And I liked it. I think the unifying factor for me, consciousness, yeah, and it's a paradigm shifting perspective. It's a direct experience that's so far beyond logic that you have to literally rethink everything. And so they're very powerful. And I'm wondering if the person, I would like to induce that, but I realized having these states, I couldn't live there. It's not functional. There's no way. I got to go to the grocery store. But now that I've had them, I'm like, I feel complete. If I get another one, it's like such a bonus. It's like, I call it like a visit home. Everything is just, you are connected to the whole universe. It feels so good. And you're like, yes. And then you come back and he's like, no, I'm separate again. Oh no, but you're not, you just forget. And so that's what makes this challenging. But I also think it's beautiful, because that's, I think, maybe why we're here, to experience that separateness, to grow, to be like Zelda, to have your own experiences. I was like, oh, is this thing friendly? No, it bit me. Okay. All of a sudden you just learn and adapt, and if everything were easy and perfect, it would be no fun to experience this. So back to you.
I appreciate your keen insight and your desire to achieve a higher state of awareness. And the question is, why do so many people try to do that? I meditate. They should be teaching meditation early on in life, cultivating it, and maybe we'll have a better chance of achieving our dual awareness, that ego dissolution, that unifying connection with life, nature, people. I don't know I don't have a magic formula that will induce these kinds of experiences. I'm not going to say to somebody, have a near-death experience, right now. But meditation, as far as I'm concerned, and other types of mind-body techniques like yoga, Tai Chi, etc., anything contemplative, anything that inhibits external input into the brain, quieting the brain seems to be a very critical characteristic of the brain that is unique in these different kinds of experiences. And maybe when your brain is sort of put out of the equation, you can, in other words, impede its limiting influence. It impedes you. It suppresses your ability to be you. The brain collects memories, and those memories influence our behavior. The past, therefore, equals the present. The brain acts like that, and it's unfortunate. I have fears based on prior unfortunate events. That shouldn't be. That's illogical to me. So I'm a hostage to my brain, my memories. Even ancestral memories are now finding in studies of transgenerational epigenetic inheritance. Memories, experiences of my ancestors can actually even skip generations, manifest in DNA, and be exhibited in offspring now. I may have fears because my great-great-grandfather, had some kind of experience that induced a change in their DNA, passed it along. We're held hostage to that. The brain is limiting. It's beautiful in many ways. It is, but it's highly fallible, and we don't understand it. We say we do, but we don't. There seems to be quantum processes going on here. There seems to be biophoton-like emissions being generated from the brain. And when we meditate, which I feel is maybe the best way to achieve this state of unity, the states that you're describing, in a natural way, not having to have a cardiac arrest and a near-death experience, or being held hostage to a UAP incident, etc., or having to take LSD. A lot of people do that. DMT is very popular. I'm not advocating it. You have to be very careful. If you do it, do it with what? With a well-known guide, counselor, who can take you through the process and manage you as best as possible. So you're in good hands. It's something you should not experiment with alone, by yourself with a bottle of booze. Don't do that. It might be a good way of achieving this dual awareness, giving you truth. That's what they say. That's what they say. Not all the time, but yes, you're right. It is used to treat anxiety, depression. It may vary, PTSD as well. They're finding it to be somewhat beneficial. Of course, more research is needed along all these lines, and maybe especially DMT, like all drugs. In fact, they find these psychoactive drugs on in pockets, that are thousands of years old. That people then, in other words, back all the way back, the shamans, those that lived. They lived off the land. And guess what? DMT is in just about everything that's grown. So they were probably hallucinating more than you think. And maybe they, at that time, thought that that was reality. And they didn't know. Now we're a little bit more advanced. We can figure it out. That's, it's different and it's not, maybe it is reality. Maybe it is. Maybe it does give us insight into an alternate dimension, ultimate truth. I don't know. I'm not one to dismiss that as a possibility. I'm not embracing it, however, as absolute fact as well. We have to be very careful not to introduce biases to this. But I'm open-minded enough, especially since I've had these unique experiences, which allows me to be. It's easy for me to say. I'm not advocating that everybody take DMT, and if you do it carefully, okay, with someone who guides you through it. But is that the way to achieve, again, ultimate reality? Maybe, maybe not. Meditation? Maybe, maybe not. But I don't believe it's illusory in nature. I don't believe it's an hallucination. When people have near-death experiences, there are so many nuances to that experiences that makes you wonder, what's going on? In other words, why do they see just about only deceased relatives? Why don't they see, while they're having that experience, their neighbor next door? Why just supreme beings, unique to their culture, consistent with their culture, and deceased relatives? And what gets me are these so-called Pekindarian cases. They actually see people who they did not know had died. When they're resuscitated, they then talk about it with others and said, I saw Gary when I had my NDE on the other side, and they say, yeah, and someone says, yes, Gary did die, and the person says, I didn't know he died, but they know it from their NDE. That happens a lot. Why? They have these experiences where they can retrieve such detailed facts during their NDE that they didn't when they didn't have their NDE. And it's accurate. What causes that? Even individuals who are blind. Bruce Grayson, noted NDE researcher, he did a study with those who were blind. I think about 12, 14 individuals, never sighted, had an NDE. Now, they didn't see exactly like sighted people, but they had enough visual kinds of effects during their NDE to have accurate perceptions of their environment. That means what? They're not their abnormal visual system. They went beyond the limitations of their central nervous system and brain to what? To experience something that possibly is non-3D in nature. Okay. Does that say that you are not your brain? Even very young children, 4, 5, 6, have NDEs that are the same as adults and older children. And these kids, via studies, have shown that they were never told about NDEs, never explained. Why should they be? They come up with these experiences that parallel adults. They see the deceased supreme beings. Wonder why? I wonder why. That again is a nuance that raises the possibility that the near-death experience is not a brain event, especially the shared death experiences. Like I had, it's like I'm sitting writing something at the table and I have this overwhelming, profound sense of knowingness that a friend died or a relative died, only to find that they did die. You know something? It's not that unusual. It isn't. Question is, of course, what is causing this transference of information on an invisible pathway? Maybe from the deceased, maybe from the consciousness or I of that person to me. This happens. Why do people in the dying process also have deathbed visions of deceased relatives, and they feel great comfort and ease? Why do individuals who have terminal lucidity, what is that? They're in a coma for months, maybe years. Suddenly they're revived. They're lucid. Their brain is just about non-existent. They're being maintained on machines for a long period of time. Suddenly they wake up lucid, talk like you or I. Terminal lucidity. Lucidity, it's a known term. It's a known event. And they report their experience while they were in a coma, comparable to that of a near-death experience. They have a minimal amount of time to converse with their family, which is to a great benefit of the family, because shortly after they do, they then die. It's like they provide somehow a window of opportunity to say goodbye, despite the limitations of their brain. I can't figure that out. Out-of-body experiences, that people have veridical perceptions, accurate recall of events while they were in a coma, let's say, in environments where they should not be able to experience with their sensory systems. It does not happen often, but often enough where researchers say that this person accurately recalled events in another area of the hospital or building that they should not have. And here's a person who had an out-of-body experience, and she says, the doctor was acting like a bird just before surgery. The doctor was then was told about that. Your patient, just before he did surgery, said that you were acting like a bird. And the doctor said, this is documented. The doctor says, I have a habit. Every time I scrub for surgery, I have to keep my hands dry. So I have a habit of doing this. I move my elbows like this to get some of the water off. And he's like flapping wings, which is what that person described. You have these kinds of events that are, it occurs millions of times over and over in varying ways, but they are so inconsistent with scientific principles, but yet so believable and remarkable given the details of the synchronistic event, the accuracy of recall, the perceptions that are occurring that are verified by others. It makes you wonder, how could this individual do what he or she is doing using just the brain alone? We don't know how the brain can do this. Maybe it can. We just haven't found the brass ring yet, but it's unlikely. We don't know where in the brain consciousness is generated. We don't know where the sense of I exists. We know a lot about the brain, but even even people like what's his name, Wilfred Penfield, neurosurgeons. They induce memories of the past, experiences of light and sound and music, and even an out of body experience in individuals by stimulating their brain with electrical conduction. So some scientists will say, out-of-body experience and native experience must be anatomically related. No, when you stimulate the brain, a person might feel a sense of floating, a sensation of movement. Again, that inability to distinguish external from internal reality. They lose concepts of time and space. That's not an out-of-body experience. It's out-of-body like experience. And here again, we need to, again, develop criteria to better understand what these terms really, really mean. Sleep disorders. We all have had instances where REM sleep or dreams can infiltrate into wakefulness, hypnagogic sleep transitions, it's called. I could be dreaming for a period of time while conscious. There's a little miscommunication in the brain, and people can believe that their dream is actually real. And that can result in misperceptions, misinformation, and believing in something that really isn't there. So some scientists think that these events that we're talking about are induced by sleep transition disorders. No, it's not. It's not the same. It's similar. It's it's not the same. That's the issue at hand here. There are such unique features of these kinds of peak experiences that separate them distinctly from brain events, at least that we know of. And then if you come up with the discipline of parapsychology and talk about extrasensory perception, my gosh, it's real. If there's one thing that I can say is valid, is extrasensory perception. I have no doubt that it is real. And the point is this: aspects of ESP, this communication on a visible pathway, is a common feature of these peak experiences. And quantum physics helps to explain, not that it does perfectly, helps to explain how communication in this way can be possible. I've hogged enough of your time. I'm sure you have some questions at hand, and we can move forward from there. Please go ahead.
Well, again, you just shared a lot, and I have a ton of questions. I think when you're talking about the near-death experience, I had Eben Alexander on, and he's a neurosurgeon and had a near-death experience and then wrote a book, Proof of Heaven, and another one, a follow-up. He's on the podcast as well, talking a lot of similar things that you're saying, and again, from a scientific background. And for him, he never even considered any of this kind of thing until that happened. And so I think for me, what I'm curious about is what conclusions have you come to, or what do you hope to get out with your books? Like, what's your intention? Is it that you want the scientific community to start to take this stuff seriously and look into it? Because from my view and my experience, a lot of the stuff I know it exists because I've experienced it directly, and that was my pursuit. And so that made me resist science in a little bit of a way, because they were saying it's not possible. And I was like, what? I know that there's something in me that is a little bit more. And I've dedicated a lot of my life to figuring out how the heck to do it, spending a lot of time in meditation, this winter doing cold plunges to see what that does. Anything that I could do to kind of raise my consciousness and experience it directly has been a pursuit of mine. And I would love to have more of a scientific understanding around it, whether it's lucid dreaming, it doesn't matter. But my curiosity is always, what are the conclusions you've come to? What do you hope to get out there with the book? And how can somebody take any of this information as just a regular Joe, whether they want to experience it, and how do they use it to improve their lives? And then I'm going to throw it in there now, because this is a final one. When you did your study on UFO and that kind of phenomenon, what was your most compelling evidence that said it exists? And so, just to share a personal story of mine again, is that when I was younger, when I started to go down the rabbit hole, I was curious why we had war, started doing some research, started seeing ancient civilizations, started asking different questions, and it always got to aliens. And I was like, nope, I'm not doing aliens because that's just too much. My friends already think I'm a nut. I'm not going there. Did a little bit more research. I had a peak experience. First question that I had after that was, so asked a good friend of mine who had one as well. I was like, what do you think of aliens? And like 100%, dude. And I was like, how can you say 100%? They're like, I've seen, told me a story about 7 orbs moving back and forth, something really curious. And he said that experience changed my view there. And so instantly I started to take that idea seriously. And I have done that. I've gone to Egypt with the Resident Science Foundation. I have certain guests on my podcast. I've had experiences that are direct. But, for me, all it's doing is expanding my consciousness on a day-to-day. I don't know how much it helps, to be honest, getting groceries and being a good human being and all that kind of stuff. But I just wanted to send all that your way and hear your views on it.
I love it. And I admire you for your intention. And that's an important word here, intention. It's powerful. And we should cultivate it more and utilize it more than we do. And unfortunately, we don't. I admire your quest to achieve these kinds of expanded states of awareness. I wish everybody did. The question is, why do so many try? It's almost as if we have this innate sense of knowing that there's more than just the brain. There's more to consciousness. There's more to reality. And, this is cool. But there's a lot of downside to all of this. There's a lot of negative. Besides negative people, this is beautiful, and it can be hell at the same time for too many, for too long throughout history. Things get better, things get worse. It doesn't make sense. There's too much illogic, too much killing, death, savagery, destruction of our beautiful planet. Which is probably a conscious entity in and of itself. It's alive, and we're destroying it. I'm trying to stimulate thought. Everybody's different, so that level of stimulation is going to result in different outcomes. Yes, I want to convince science to shift their paradigm from realism to something like idealism. Let's take the subjective experience much more seriously than we do. 1 and 1 equals 2. Newtonian physics has served us beautifully for a long time. We have to use it, obviously. We have to. But let's incorporate. Let's also look at much more seriously. Let's also interpret reality on the basis of the viewpoints and experiences of millions of people like you and others who have these who touch other realities, who interact with other beings, who receive information from another source, not a book, not the internet, but it's downloaded to them as millions claim it to be. Many inventors like Einstein, Thomas Edison, I forget the person's name, Ramanujan. Let's take him for an example from India. I'm mispronouncing his name. Maybe you know it. Ramanujan never took a class in math, had dreams of math. Okay? His formulas are still being used by mathematicians. Okay? He didn't know how he did it. Through a dream, many dreams. The person who developed the periodic table in chemistry, I didn't do it, he says. They came to me in dreams. I purposely set the clock to wake me up every hour of the night so that I can write down the information received in my dream. Periodic table evolved out of that. It's not unique. Many scientists, musicians also get this kind of, they say it didn't come from me. Downloaded. What are they tapping into? Akashic records? Is it this semantic field, as many say, that's out here? Do we interact with some form of energy? And you ask the question, and rightly so, what did I find? Is there anything that I can conclude? Unfortunately, I can't. I wish I could give you that magic formula to achieve this state. You're on the road. You've touched it. There's a ways to go. It's beautiful. I commend you, Matthew. I truly do. And by the way, your program with Eben Alexander was wonderful, and I had the pleasure of speaking with him. Oh, he believes, obviously, as you know, that he experienced another reality. And the person he met when he had that near-death experience, he didn't know it. He didn't know it, but he was describing this woman, I believe, and I'm not clear on the facts. He was describing this woman, unknown to him, who was a close relative. He didn't know that she was a close relative, yet he's giving details of her appearance and what she's saying, and the people who knew her are saying, yes, you're describing whoever she was. Now, how did he know that? Again, these things happen, the nuances within their experience. The brain doesn't do that. Or if it does, and maybe it does have that unique ability, we just haven't found it yet. But we should take advantage of it. Try to enhance human potential as much as possible by trying to better understand and cultivate these kinds of experiences that incorporate maybe biophotons, these ultra weak photon emissions. They've been detected, they've been accurately measured on body surfaces, in DNA, in brain cells, using sophisticated instrumentation. And with these biophotons, there's a torsion wave. It's like a form of radiation that connects subatomic particles. It spreads throughout space, radiating energy and interacting very possibly with other people, other people's biophotons. Maybe this explains that invisible pathway that we're talking about when we talk about telepathy, or when we see an experiment where we take twins. This has been done. You put one twin in a Faraday cage, another in another cage. Electrical energy, for example, cannot enter into that environment. You instruct each one of them while they have electrodes to measure their EEG activity. Instruct each of them to feel a sense of union. Tell them, feel bonded, feel close. When they're instructed to do that, all of a sudden the EEG activity results in a synchronized EEG. Their brains, in other words, become so similar that experts in EEG interpretations will say it's impossible for this to happen. This is unique. The only way it could happen is if they're somehow communicating with each other. You flicker a bright light in one twin, well, immediately alpha wave activity is detected in the other twin, as if they are receiving light. Okay? Again, we see, I can go on talking about these kinds of experiences, studies, experimental studies that clearly reveal in my mind that, yeah, non-local intuition, non-locality exists, meaning I can communicate with others. I can affect physical systems in a subtle but real way, despite distance and time. And people have done this through remote viewing, sponsored by the CIA, the FBI, and other agencies back in the 80s here and also in the Soviet Union as a means to spy on each other with some degree of accuracy. Where's the missiles? You know, how many? All of that, with some degree of accuracy. Biophotons. We need more research on that. And I mentioned this prior. It changes in its intensity as a result of intention. Meaning, if somebody, karma, we feel good karma from people, bad karma from people. What are we looking at? Well, we're assessing language, we're assessing their looks, their nonverbal skills. Maybe, however, we're also somehow interpreting that form of energy that's generated by them. Okay? That maybe that is karma. Who knows? That the essence of them. Maybe the biophotons is consciousness, a form of energy that may very well one day be part of the unified field theory, along with electromagnetism, gravitational forces, and the two nuclear forces. And bingo, there is biophotons or consciousness, a form of energy that must be recognized, that must be cultivated for the good of humanity. Mind-body interactions, healing. We see a dramatic increase in biophoton emissions from the brains of those who direct their attention for the purpose of healing another human being. And there is some degree of success associated with that, with some people who are capable of doing that. Medical healings, well-documented examples. We got to be careful with the placebo effect, of course. The recipient may believe that they're being healed and thus can be healed. We see placebo as a very powerful, positive outcome, 30 to 40% of cases. Doctors recognize that clearly. That should also be explored much more so, to figure out what is going on. Belief, intention on the part of the person. If their intention says, hey, the doctor said if I take this pill, I'm going to not have pain or it's going to be reduced. They believe it. And guess what? Yeah, it's a sugar pill. They take 2 of it every 4 hours. And what do they say the next day? My pain decreased or was eliminated. Belief, intention. There's something to that. There's something with that mind, body, or mind. We use that loosely too. Intention, consciousness. There's something to that. But what is it? What is it? Well, we see meditation having a pronounced effect on bodily systems, generally positive. We see long-term meditators having an increase in white matter in their brain, a decrease in the size of the amygdala, which gives rise to fear, anger. That's a positive anatomical change associated with long-term meditators. So in a sense, you can create your reality. You can change reality. Maybe it's a slow process, but meditation is one way. You change. This is recognized, documented. You do change physical systems as a result of physical systems, meaning the brain, in positive ways through meditating. Why? And thus, it should be taught as early on in life as possible, aggressively, along with other forms of mind-body techniques, meditative-like techniques, and to develop new techniques that can access, bring about a positive outcome in the form of human potential. I don't think we are fully aware of what us humans are capable of doing. We advance technologically in a remarkable geometric way over time, but where have we evolved spiritually? Well, we have to some extent, I will, but maybe not to a large extent. We have our ancestors. Let's go back a few thousand years. Let's talk about the shamans. Let's talk about how they viewed reality, life. They thought consciousness was the essence of everything. Well, technology is cool, but the importance of what is important in life, cultivating our intuition, our understanding of reality, maybe these non-physical kinds of abilities like ESP. We get too caught up in trying to achieve happiness through money, through eating, and other means that oftentimes have too often a negative effect on us in some way. Our priorities are not appropriate. Why doesn't everybody meditate? Doctors, look at this. We know that stress is a cause of disease, inflammation, in so many ways. It underlies all gastrointestinal pathologies on the order of about 70, 80%. But even though there is such a positive effect of stress on the body in a negative way, doctors don't prescribe it. Only 5% of doctors in a recent study say to their patients, you know what, relax. In fact, you should be meditating or doing something that causes this kind of relaxation, mindfulness meditation. 5%. That's interesting, isn't it? They're held hostage to the materialistic mantra that they learn in school, and also the employees from drug companies knocking on their door, telling them to solicit this drug over this drug to their patients to manage stress. Well, yeah, medicine is important, obviously, but oftentimes meditation, stress reduction techniques, not chemicals, can certainly supplement, coexist with medicine, or be the ultimate and only proper advice to take to manage the problem. Unfortunately, our priorities are not right. We haven't evolved as much as we should, and we will. And understanding consciousness, mind-body interactions, through different techniques yet to be discovered is essential. And yet science ignores it. Medicine largely ignores it. Psychologists largely ignore it. But many psychologists are moving to mindfulness meditation, to their credit, and they should. Many positive outcomes from studies that are done in people who meditate, without question. Reduction in anxiety, improvement in their depression, not a cure-all for all, but it helps as a complementary alternative way of managing a very unpleasant, unfortunate symptom. Everybody should meditate. I hate to tell people what to do, but it's easy to say that because it can only have positive benefits. You mentioned a UAP study. Very quickly, I did a study with some people on over 3,000 individuals who reported to have interacted with unidentified aerial phenomena and associated entities, like the little grays and human-looking individuals. And those were the two most common entities. Yeah, the reptilians and other associated, types of beings that are largely recognized when we talk about that topic. But they experience, again, expanded consciousness. I left the body. I was subjected to some kinds of medical examinations, but that's, and had telepathic communication, understand what life is all about, had expanded consciousness. 80% of people who interact with this phenomenon say they had an expansion of awareness, that they had telepathic communication with these beings. They said after the event, they're psychic. Many claim, in fact, to be able to heal others through intention alone. It's generally a positive effect, not always. Approximately 75% of these 3,000 plus individuals who interact with the phenomena say that they are transformed in a positive way along the lines that we have been talking about, consistent with the near-death experience and the psychoactive drug outcome. In fact, researcher Dr. Rick Strausman, who did the initial study using DMT, dimethyltryptamine, at the University of New Mexico back in the early 2000s, he and John Mack met. John Mack was the noted psychiatrist from Harvard University who believed that the alien abduction phenomena. He had a fight for tenure because of that, unusual, shall we say, belief or research endeavor. Anyone, unfortunately, he was killed in an auto accident in England, following that. But the point is this: John Mack's research, looking at the behavioral transformations that people incurred resulting from interaction with that phenomena, was essentially the same as Strausman's results in individuals who took DMT in many, many ways. In fact, Rick Strausman, I encourage your listeners who may be interested to look at a YouTube video. I don't have the address, where Rick Strassman talks about this. And he says, we were blown away by the similarities. That says a lot. Why don't we continue doing research along these lines? Because why do we have these two dissimilar events, psychoactive drugs and unidentified aerial phenomena, and yet you get a similar outcome? I can't help but be curious. And I don't know why I'm curious, and another person will say, that's interesting. Yeah, I gotta go home and catch the ball game on TV, take it easy. And that's cool. I'm not denouncing that, but we have our priorities and interests. And to me, to evolve spiritually, it requires us, I think, to ask more questions about this. And that's another intention of my book, for people to begin asking questions about along the lines we're talking about, along the quest that you have, asking these questions about what's ultimate reality. Can I expand my awareness and become happier, a more humane individual, for the good of myself and others who I interact with? That's a beautiful goal. As opposed to trying to increase your bank account and hitting a home run on some stock, which is not a bad idea, but it shouldn't be the ultimate objective. Love. And I forgot to mention this, and it's a big miss on my part. John Lennon was right when he said, love is the answer. They all come away from this peak experience with that in mind. Love is the answer. Young kids who have near-death experiences express that intention. Love is the answer in their own unique, childlike language, semantic context ways. Love is the answer. Why? Why do they have that noted belief? Why do they express that? Love, not something else. And it's shared among individuals. It's almost as if they're given a message. Maybe it's an innate outcome of piercing the veil of another reality. Maybe it comes reflexively, unless somebody tells them. I don't know, but it becomes part of them. That's the point. They have that understanding that to them is real. And if they understand that love, and they feel it, that a pronounced sense of love that they've never experienced before, that they yearn to have again. It's like something we all are aware of, where people who have near-death experiences feel such a profound love unconditionally. That's ineffable. You can't put it into words. They as a result of feeling that, and when they're given a command by some supreme being or relative that they have to go back into the body, they have things to achieve, objectives still to express, as we all hear from anecdotal reports by people who experience that. They are reluctant. They don't want to, because of that profound feeling of love. And when they go back into their body, they do have a sense of depression. They want to feel that again. And now they're back in the state of pain that they were before. And they long for it again. Most people, 80% in some studies, who have out-of-body experiences want to continue to have it. We see that 80% of 1,200 individuals in our UAP study don't want the experience to end. People who are on their deathbed and interact with deceased relatives who are sitting on their bed or in the corner of their room, or angels are flapping their wings about, as they say. Studies say that this is more common than not. Some hospice workers say 90% of those who are in that dying transition say this. Well, if it's an hallucination, all of it's an hallucination, great, give me some. I want to hallucinate. If it's going, hallucination is a bad term. We ascribe that term to, something bad. Well, again, language and its semantic, relationships are often interpretedly often interpreted wrongly, and thus have a negative connotation as being woo-woo in nature, metaphysical, new agey. There's a lot of that stuff. There's a lot of pseudoscience in UAP. It's often, you can look at it like a business almost like a circus if you go to their conventions. There is some good science going on with that, but it's fragmented. It's done by a small select group, like ESP. It's done at the Rhine Institute. It's done at the Windbridge Institute. We see things going on here where researchers are studying each individual thing, but in a very limited way, with not enough money. What granting agency is going to gladly give you $10 million to study unidentified aerial phenomena? I don't think NSF or NIH is going to do that anytime soon. Nor are academicians going to do it for fear of ridicule by colleagues. And they want to get tenure, so they're not going to rock the boat and mess around with something that's considered woo-woo, metaphysical, new agey in nature. Their reputation is on the line here. So they're going to stick to what's acceptable by materialistic scientists, realists. I'm trying to stimulate thought. That's all I'm trying to do. I lost the audio. I can't hear you.
Try it again. Is that better?
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, I can hear you.
Mike just now. Am I back? Am I still good?
I can hear you.
Okay, cool. What the heck?
These things happen with me all the time, and hosts will say it's never happened, and something happened on the show I just did, Thinking Aloud, with Jeffrey Mishlove. He had an technical experience with me that he said never has happened. I can go into detail, but I'd bore you and the audience, but these things happen.
Yeah, weird. Well, what I was going to say is you touched on a lot of points there again that I think are great. And I wanted to bring up some of the points I thought that were really good. Like one is meditation in school. And when I was going through school, when I was doing martial arts as a kid, doing practices that were similar. I was connecting with my body, meditation, mindfulness techniques, things like that. And then I started to research consciousness and other techniques like lucid dreaming. How do I expand my awareness? What are the Navy SEALs doing? How do we create these peak states? And what I found was that nobody understood or none of this stuff was taught. And I thought it was so important. And I always thought it was weird that it wasn't taught. And that's my motivation behind Zen Athlete, is that what I've discovered is that the techniques are not that complicated. We're just not taught them. So when you talked about your experiences, and the results that people had from them, saying they started to reprioritize their values, that's such a simple thing. They started to realize that they need to be a little bit more intentional. They started to realize that they needed to be a little bit more kinder, to seek a little bit more meaning. And so in the mindfulness field, what I'm always curious about are the best mind-body techniques that are out there. But what'll happen when you use them is things will just get simpler. You'll be more prioritized. You'll understand what your values are, and you'll have the right ranking system. Like you said, you need money. Like doing the podcast, I need money. And thank you to all my patrons. It helps a lot, because if I didn't get that, I don't know. I have no idea how I've been able to keep doing this, but it's a part of it. But putting out the content was my highest priority. Traveling and researching was my highest priority. Exploring the planet and asking these questions was my highest priority. And I feel aligned when I do that personally. When I work with people and we're looking at these practices, when they get their values set, when they're intentional, when they're just doing the basics of mindfulness, their life transforms. Sometimes they change their jobs. They feel so much better. It's really simple. So I agree wholeheartedly and that we need to implement these things in schools. And when I went down the rabbit hole of conspiracy stuff, I was looking at hypnosis, persuasion, and I looked at the school system and all this stuff, and I realized, and through my research and my guess, is that it's not taught on purpose at this time, or the educational system is just too rigid and too slow moving to adapt to new information to put in the curriculum, if you want to say it nicely. But if you look at universities as businesses and all the crap that goes down there, funding, losing tenure for thinking that UFOs exist, research ancient civilizations, do some research. If you're a doctor or a scientist, it's not that hard to see when you start to analyze things, right? But there's no money in it, and then it becomes an issue. So, I think that is a big deal. And so what I wanted to kind of throw your way is I've got about 10 minutes here before I got to wrap it up. So I'm going to give you a whole bunch for you pick what you like. But in researching all of this stuff like UFOs and things like that, what is your conclusion? Like, when I had these peak experiences, I did not get the answer. I got way more questions. That's what I got. Way more questions. I really knew that I knew nothing at all. So what for you would be your big questions that you think are most important for people to ask for themselves? Your view on if this phenomena is here. We look at ancient civilizations. I've studied with 3 different elders that have lineages of 20,000 years, all of them. The lineage is 20,000 years. It's oral. And guess what? All of them say the same thing. And this isn't through books. This isn't through what we get. And they said the same thing too about the UFO community and these things, is we need to be very specific and practical too, because, before, back in the day, there was only so many people channeling and having these experiences. Now you go to a UFO conference and every single person is talking to an extraterrestrial. Every single person has, these experiences, and we want to give them credibility, right? But also now it's a market. You know what I mean? So we want to be open-minded, but we also want to be discerning at the same time, because then you're going to realize not everything is the same. And now it's become a little bit more popular because, even just going to Burning Man and the amount of intake I get from so many different people, and I look at it and I'm just like, I don't know about that. You know what I mean? It's just like there needs to be a little bit of discernment, and people need to discern for themselves as well. Because in the UFO world now, if you just look at that, it's just chaos. It's just craziness. There's just, it's these beings and it's Galactic Federation, and then it's the blue beings from Corey Good. But then you look at this other stuff. But for me, in my own research, the most congruent information that I've gotten is from the elders, because they didn't know each other and they're saying the same stuff. And for them, the other very important thing is it's not fantastic. They're not trying to sell books. They're not really going hoorah. There's just like, this is and it's a sacred thing. The other thing is they don't even really want to share it. And 2 of them are kind of in crap with some of their people, because they're like, this is our sacred knowledge. And so if you look back in history and the work of Graham Hancock, look at some of my podcasts with David Lobear, Clifford Mahooty, look at Clifford Mahooty's work, and just look at ancient civilizations, Eric von Däniken, going through Chariots of the Gods right now. And it's really interesting there. Jeffrey Dougherty, if you go to his channel about how he's basically reading the Bible from Greek, and he's just like, dude, it's just one UFO story after another. And when you read it with that kind of technological point of view, you know exactly what it is. So what I wanted to do is just throw it back as a summary for you, and feel free to take as much time as you need. But all of that idea of if UFOs are here, if these expanded consciousnesses here, what are the big questions you ask yourself? Why do you think they're here? What's, all the biggest questions that I could throw at you and you think about. I just want you to kind of reflect on what you've come to. Who are they? Why are they here? What is consciousness? What is the meaning of life? All that.
Wow.
But do your best.
I have great respect for what you've done. And I want to spend more time talking to you. I wish we had more time to share with our discussion with your listeners. Quite remarkable. Quite remarkable. More questions are generated, and maybe that's important to do. In order to understand reality, we have to know what kind of questions first. to ask before we come to a realization about what the answer might be. Yeah, I say the same thing. More questions than answers occur. Even though we're studying the UAP phenomenon and other phenomenon for so long, still we learn a little bit about it, yeah, but we're scratching the surface still. And unfortunately, we have too many people who are clever deceptors entering into aspects of this phenomenon for monetary gain, as you mentioned. And it attracts people who are not as well balanced as we like, and thus UAP research is regarded as a pseudoscience, because people say I'm a UAP researcher, they know nothing about research. And it's a pseudoscience at best, despite the fact that there are pockets of some good research going on. But we're not going to find an answer soon. It's a nuts and bolts issue, but forget the nuts and bolts, man. Forget it. Forget Roswell. Forget Phoenix Lights. It's important these things happen, but let's stop with the retro analyzing things in a retro perspective. Let's be prospective with our following research to better understand how consciousness is impacted when one interacts with the phenomena. That's my most critical question about this. It's a consciousness issue. It's a non-physical issue. People are interacting with some form of intelligence, and what they perceive as these little grays or human looking or whatever, that might be just a clever disguise. That might be a memory implant or distortion that the intelligence is giving them so that they can, who knows. But this phenomenon existed just about forever. It's depicted in folklore, in the Bible, in various texts, on cave walls. And people have interacted with it through time. And it's even morphed in shape through time, even from the 1890s, where these UAPs appeared as the dirigibles of the time. We had the blimps going on back then. Well, these things manifested, they looked a little like it, but not exactly. They morphed into the Foo Fighters in World War II, then the Moon Men, the Venusians of the 50s, and the contactees. Then the alien abduction phenomenon suddenly sprung up in the 60s when Betty and Barney Hill were claimed to have been abducted. They probably were. But the alien abduction phenomenon really didn't take off until Strieber wrote Communion. And then people started looking at the cover and seeing the alien gray, and then millions are saying, that's exactly what I saw when I had my interaction with the UAP. The big head, the black eyes, and the two dots here and a slit for a mouth, humanoid looking. And they freak out. They can't believe it, that it's represented here in the picture. That is essentially the same as they saw. Why? And why does everybody just about says the same thing in terms of the physical appearance of these beings? There's a few different kinds. But the messages that they receive, more importantly, relate to consciousness, relate to spiritual evolution. And maybe they had a hand in guiding us in some way over time so that we can evolve spiritually. And we still need help. And they're still here. The UAP is valid. There's no question about it. There's no question about it. The question is not if everybody's saying, is it real or not? Is it valid? That's not the question. The answer, we have the answer. Of course it is. Of course it is. The question is, what's the intelligence behind it? What's their objective? And yeah, I'm curious, where do they come from? Another solar system, another dimension. We have theories in science that support the possibility of multiverses, branches from a tree, and it coexists with ours. And Stephen Hawking, Mikio Kaku, they ascribe to this at some level, and they give alternate realities some credence, mathematically derived, logically obtained, with good reasoning. Doesn't mean it's real, but we're touching upon it. We acknowledge the good possibility, mathematically at least, that it exists, and we see the connection with the subjective experience with the theory. Don't you see? let's put it together. 1 and 1 equals 2. Well, that kind of equation doesn't exist with this complex enigmatic phenomena. Let's put that subjective experience of no time, no space, of a profound sense of love, of behavioral transformations as a result of the experience, and everything else we've talked about. Let's associate that now with theory. Does it match? Does it make sense? Let's associate that with the behavior of subatomic particles. That's another area I didn't get into because there are a lot of similarities in the way they operate and reality and what people are describing when they have these experiences. Can we extrapolate, in other words, from the microscopic level of the subatomic world to human function and performance on a macroscopic level, on a cosmological level? My friend, colleague, astrophysicist at Harvard University, Rudy Shield, now retired, he regards black holes as the neuron of God's brain. The neuron of God's brain, meaning there's an information field in a black hole where all events, past, present, and even future, which exist simultaneously, exist in a black hole. And some people may have the ability to access it when they leave their body, to retrieve this information. Maybe. But let's put this together. Why are leading scientists, some leading scientists, claiming this, making these announcements through their own unique discovery? And if true, then it explains a lot about what we're talking about. If true that the multiverse exists, as many scientists explain, says it does, that says a lot about what we're talking about. Experiments in ESP, life after death, consciousness distinctly different than the brain, alternate realms, we persist after bodily death, and all of the above in ways we can't even fathom right now. This is only 2019, and there's a lot of nonsense out there. We have to be very careful what we read, who we listen to. Fortunately, you have leading scientists on your podcast. You do a wonderful job helping to educate humanity. Bringing that level of knowledge and communication to the forefront is a beautiful thing. It's like the highest kind of humane quality, other than giving and receiving love and being compassionate, obviously, to others, but sharing those aspects of truth and knowledge. Some of it is bullshit, but a lot of it is true. And there are too many clever deceptors and sociopaths out there that ascribe to knowing X, Y, Z. We have to be careful about who and what to believe. Separate the sense from the nonsense. Very easy to say. We could easily be fooled. We can easily be biased through wishful thinking into believing something is real because we want it to be true when it's not. We're very susceptible to that. This is a delicate system, highly flawed, remarkable in its ability, but yet we're only human, and we have many more questions than answers to address. And with people like you, and you're a unique individual, you truly are. You know, the question is, why are you doing what you do? How come you're not wearing a suit and walking into a bank behind a desk, you know, talking to clients? Instead, you're helping humanity. That's where you come from. That's your objective, to help yourself spiritually in your own unique way. And in turn, as you evolve spiritually, you can then better serve others. And that is to me, is the highest humane quality. Trying to seek the truth. You are a true truth seeker. I hate to use that kind of term. You know, what does that mean? Maybe that's an innate quality. Our ancestors were truth seekers. You know, why is the moon, you know, darkening, you know, from the shadow? Why is this streak occurring in the night sky? They want to find out questions to life. Well, we have answers to those kind of things, but we have many more questions. And we'll still have those questions. And those answers to those questions probably won't be achieved, found. Maybe when we leave the body, maybe, who knows, maybe we'll get it then. We can only speculate. And it's, in a way, it's stimulating and fun to do so, because we do have a sense of gain, that we're satisfying some innate quality by just trying to find the answers, trying to share the information about all of this. And there's a lot of truth to it. There's a lot of misinformation too with it. And we have to be careful how we interpret it. I have to be careful how I express it. I hope people who read my book, The Unseen Forces, The Integration of Science, Reality, and You, and I'm not pushing it to sell. I get 5 cents on a dollar. Okay? I get 5 cents on a dollar. So I'm not saying buy it so I can be wealthy. Money's not an issue. Buy it for what? So that to satisfy me is my words satisfy you. And hopefully you can learn something or ask more questions or move on and read other books that are similar. And over time, you'll evolve spiritually too, hopefully. So thank you for all you're doing. And I know you're going to continue to do that. And that's admirable. That's beautiful.
Bob, well, I very, very much appreciate the kind words. And I remember, I think it was David Robinson, or I don't know who it was, but there was a podcast once and it said, what does it mean? I can't even remember now. I'm like blanking on it. It was something along the lines of like, what is success? Oh, that's what it was. What is success for you? And it was when people you respect you. So I appreciate that from coming from your background and everything that you've done, and having just such a wonderful mind to analyze these things and to pursue that even in quote unquote retirement, where you're maybe doing some of your most important work. But yeah, man, it's been a great podcast. We'll have to get you back on for sure. There's so much we could uncover and unpack, and I agree with your thoughts and your ideas, and it would be great if the scientific community could kind of pick up on these things and start to just look at them in a different way. And, it's interesting, the truth seeker part, because when I was younger, one of the differences was I just thought it was all baloney. I was like, these politicians are lying to me. Something's wrong here. And it was, why do we still have war if we're an intelligent species? And then going down the rabbit hole, I realized I was being manipulated, that I wasn't being told the truth. And it took me a few years to sit with. I was in a little bit of a depression. I was like, I don't understand why this system would not tell me the truth, why the system would be created to actively actually suppress me. And then you go back and back and back, and you figure out more of those layers to try to figure out what the heck is going on. And that's a never-ending story. But personal empowerment, freedom, kindness, compassion, following your inspiration, those are things we can all do now as we uncover more of the mystery. Because, when we're asking those questions, what I've noticed is like a fractal. You're like, yeah, I got this one. And then boom, it opens up a whole tree. It's like, oh, it'd be like discovering a whole new animal, right? But then you're like, oh, we've actually found a whole continent that it's got more animals in Africa. And you're like, crap. And then it's like, it's amazing. But then it's just like fractals. Like, okay, now we've discovered this new planet and it has all these other things. Oh, we found like now 1,000 planets. And so it just keeps opening up. So it's endless discovery. And I think part of it is how can we enjoy that mystery while we uncover each thing and keep it with those principles. That's the core part that you're touching on, your own inspiration, your curiosity, your value set, and your priorities, keeping it simple and staying open. So you can comment on that. I see you might want to say something, but I want to make sure that you tell people where they can find your books and where they can learn more about you and all of that stuff. And just thank you so much for coming on.
I respect everything you said, and that, again, I've said it before, that is beautiful, and that's, being a truth seeker is something that is uniquely special, and should be part of everybody's mantra and objective in varying ways. There's so much more to say, and I look forward to being back with you, and certainly to talk with you on a personal level. I'm sure I could learn a great deal from you Nevertheless, my books on Amazon, obviously. My website is bobdavisspeaks.com. That's one word, bobdavisspeaks.com. Obviously, information about myself and my books and some other stuff is on there. I don't pay enough attention to updating it. I'm in my 60s, so you don't. When somebody tells me, "Hey, go upload your interviews on a YouTube channel," I go, "What?" I'm still a little bit in that zone. So I'll turn it over to my kids. They'll figure it out. Nevertheless, listen, this has been a blast, as I said. And this is what it's all about. It really is, to share your feelings and knowledge with others. And that's great. Keep doing what you're doing, pal. I love it. Love it.
Thanks so much, Bob. You too, man. Well, we'll definitely stay connected. We'll get you back on the podcast. And on a personal note, feel free to reach out, man. Having a friend like you would be great. And that's one of the beautiful things of the podcast. You get to talk to people, when you reached out, I was like, yeah, please tell me what you've researched. That sounds amazing. So thanks for what you're doing and coming on the show, man. Appreciate it.
Hey, it's more than my pleasure. Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. See you guys. Thanks for watching. Peace.